It started as a whisper, a rumor, a myth spreading across the galaxy. Humanity, once thought to be just another fragile species, had done the impossible. They had survived, they had conquered, and now they had returned. But this time, they weren't sending diplomats. They weren't sending warnings. They were sending a fleet, a war machine so vast, so overwhelming, that even the greatest empires in the universe felt fear for the first time. 700,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled. And as it arrived, the galaxy had only one thought. Who are they coming for? The silence before the storm. At first, it was nothing. A missing ship. Then two. Then an entire trade route vanished. No wreckage. No distress calls. Just silence. The empires of the galaxy took notice. Patrol fleets were dispatched. Explorers sent to investigate. But none returned. Something was moving in the dark. Something massive. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The first sightings, a fleet beyond imagination. Then, the reports began. Fragments of data, distorted transmissions. A single grainy image leaked from a deep space probe. What it showed was impossible. A fleet, not 100 ships, not 1,000, hundreds of thousands, moving as one, silent, unstoppable. And the worst part? They bore no known insignia. No markings of any empire or faction. But the designs, the patterns, the ships were human. The panic spreads. What happened to humanity? For over a century, the galaxy had believed humanity was gone. A species too ambitious for its own good. They had fought wars against impossible odds. And then, one day, they simply vanished. No contact, no colonies, just a dead signal in the void. Most believed they had destroyed themselves. Others thought they had fled. But now, they had returned. And no one knew why. The council gathers. Fear grips the galaxy. Within hours, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Every empire sent representatives. They had seen the images. They had intercepted the radio silence of a war machine in motion. They demanded answers. Where had humanity been? Why had they disappeared? And now that they were back, what do they want? The first warning, a message that changed everything. As the leaders of the galaxy argued, a transmission arrived. A single signal, broadcasted across all known frequencies. No introduction, no threats, just a simple message. 3 words, we are coming, and then silence. Again, the nightmare realized they kept coming. The days passed, then weeks. The fleet did not slow. It did not respond to hails or warnings. It did not change course. It moved with purpose, like a storm on the horizon, growing larger every second. The greatest war fleets of the galaxy were rushed into formation. But none of their commanders wanted to fire first, because they understood one thing. This was not an invasion. This was an arrival, and nobody was ready for what came next. The last attempt at peace, and its terrifying answer. In a desperate attempt to prevent war, the Galactic Council sent one final plea. A single envoy, escorted by 100 warships, was sent to meet the fleet, to demand answers, to ask why they had returned. The envoy's ship entered the human fleet, and then, silence. No distress call, no explosion, no response. The warships waiting nearby, they vanished seconds later. And that was the moment the galaxy realized the truth. Humanity had changed. They weren't returning as explorers. They weren't returning as traders. They were returning as something else entirely. And the true horror was just beginning. The Galactic Council responds, panic at the highest level. The moment the galaxy stopped breathing, the Galactic Council was in chaos. Hundreds of species, thousands of voices, all shouting over each other. Some called for diplomacy. Others demanded immediate war. But one thing was certain. Humanity was coming. And nobody knew why. The silence was worse than war. Every attempt at communication failed. No hails were answered. No envoys returned. Humanity did not send demands, threats, or warnings. Just that single message, repeating every few days. We are coming. It was worse than a declaration of war, because it meant they didn't care about negotiations. They weren't asking for territory, trade, or surrender. They were simply marching forward. and that terrified the greatest empires in the universe. The old empires react, a divide forms. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations had different reactions. Some, like the Veiled Dominion, believed that humanity's return was an act of war, that the only way to stop them was immediate military action. But the Xenari's sovereignty, one of the oldest species, was cautious. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had faced doomsday threats before, and nothing had ever moved like this. They sent a warning to the council. Do not fire first. If they are not here for war, and we attack, we will doom ourselves. But others disagreed. The Kari Imperium, an empire known for its aggression, was not willing to wait. They mobilized their greatest fleet, 1 million warships, and they set their course, not to defend, to strike. The first mistake, an empire's arrogance. The Kari warships moved ahead of the Galactic Council's forces. They would not wait for humanity to speak. They would not kneel to fear. And so, they made a decision, one that would change everything. They fired first, the attack that should have worked, but didn't. A full-scale preemptive strike. They targeted the lead ships of the human fleet, massive energy barges, planet-killer torpedoes, a firestorm so powerful it could wipe out entire civilizations. For a moment, the galaxy watched in silence. Had the threat been eliminated? Had humanity been stopped? And then, the smoke cleared, and the horror began. They didn't even flinch. The human fleet was untouched. Not a single ship damaged. Not a single vessel out of formation. It was as if the attack had never happened. And then, for the first time, humanity responded. Not with words, not with threats, with action. The wrath of a sleeping giant. The human fleet moved. Not fast, not chaotically, precisely. They turned toward the Kari Imperium. And in an instant, the sky turned to fire. Hundreds of Tari warships vanished. Their fleets ripped apart in seconds. Entire command centers were erased from existence. It wasn't war. It was execution. And then, humanity stopped. They didn't press the attack. They didn't conquer the Kari. They simply turned forward and continued moving, as if nothing had happened. And that terrified the galaxy more than anything else. The great realization, this wasn't about conquest. The remaining empires reeled in shock. This wasn't an invasion. This wasn't war. Humanity could have wiped out the entire Kari Imperium. But they didn't. They didn't care. They were focused on something else. And now the galaxy had to know, where was the human fleet going? What was their true objective? And why now? A final attempt at diplomacy, the last plea for answers. The council sent one final envoy, a desperate attempt to understand. A fleet of 10,000 ships, not to fight, but to beg for answers. This time, the humans allowed them to approach. A single human battleship detached from the armada. A direct meeting. One chance for the galaxy to understand the truth. And when the human leader finally spoke, their words shook the universe. We are not here for you. Stay out of our way, or be erased. Then the human fleet continued forward, and the galaxy realized the nightmare wasn't over. It had only just begun. First contact, the armada reveals itself. The moment the galaxy saw the truth. The Galactic Council had sent 10,000 ships to meet the human fleet. Not as a threat, not as an attack, but as a plea for understanding. And humanity? They finally answered. A single ship, larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen, broke formation and approached. Its design was unlike any known warship. Not sleek, not elegant. It was built for one purpose. War. The Leviathan, a battleship beyond imagination. The Council's envoy expected a meeting, a chance to speak with a human leader. Instead, they were invited inside the warship. The interior was a cathedral of destruction. Weapons lined every corridor. Automated turrets tracked every movement. It was not a place of diplomacy. It was a fortress. And then, the human leader arrived. The Warborn, humanity's new evolution. The being that greeted them was human, but not. Its body enhanced, reinforced with cybernetic plating. Its eyes glowed with artificial intelligence integration. Its voice was more machine than man. It did not bow. It did not greet them. It simply spoke. You wanted answers. Here they are. A holographic display filled the room. And what it showed? It made the entire council delegation stagger in horror. The true enemy. The reason humanity had returned. The display revealed a nightmare. An enemy so old, so beyond comprehension, that even the oldest empires had forgotten them. The Harbingers. A force that had erased civilizations before history was even recorded. An enemy so powerful that nothing had ever stopped them. And now, they were awakening, deep in the void. And humanity? Humanity had spent centuries preparing for them. We are not here for you. The council envoys could barely speak. They had feared humanity's return. They had believed they were the greatest threat. But they had been wrong, because humanity wasn't here for conquest. They weren't here to destroy the council. They were here to stop something worse. You think we are your enemies? The Warborn leader said. You have no idea what is coming. The display changed, showing entire galaxies consumed by the Harbingers. Empires that had once ruled the stars, reduced to nothing. And at the center of it all, a signal, a message from the darkness. A single terrifying phrase. We are awake. The Council's choice, stand with humanity or be left behind. The Galactic Council faced a decision they had never expected. Humanity had been feared, hated, but now they were the only force capable of stopping what was coming. And the Council had a choice. They could stand with humanity, or they could stay out of their way. Because one thing was clear, humanity was not asking for permission. They were already marching to war. And the only question left was, would the galaxy survive what came next? The silent march, planets abandoned in fear. The galaxy watches in terror. The human fleet did not stop. It did not wait for diplomacy. It did not alter its course. It simply moved forward, unstoppable, unchallenged, like a force of nature. And the rest of the galaxy? They could only watch in fear. Worlds fall silent before the storm. The first planets along humanity's path panicked. Civilizations evacuated. Entire worlds abandoned overnight. It didn't matter that humanity hadn't fired a single shot. The sheer presence of their armada was enough. Because the galaxy understood one thing. If humanity wanted a planet gone, it would be gone. No defenses could stop them. No fleet could challenge them. So one by one, planets fell silent. Not because of war, but because of fear. The Zerath Empire reacts. A last attempt at power. There was one exception. One empire that refused to run. The Zerath Dominion. They were once the most powerful force in the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaved entire civilizations, and they would not bow to humanity. So they made a fatal mistake. They declared war. The Battle of Akari's Prime, a foe that never had a chance. The Zerath fleet waited at Akari's Prime, one of their strongest military worlds, a fortress planet built for war. They had assembled a defense fleet of 200,000 ships, an unmatched military force. And when the human fleet arrived, they opened fire immediately. Planet-destroying weapons unleashed. Missiles launched. A firestorm that should have torn through an empire. And then, the humans responded. Not with words, not with threats, but with obliteration. The firestorm, annihilation in seconds. Humanity's fleet did not slow. It did not dodge. It did not even acknowledge the attack. Because the moment they returned fire, it was over. The first wave of human ships fired in perfect unison. Energy lances tore through Zerath warships as if they were paper. Their defensive shields collapsed in an instant. And in less than 5 minutes, the Zerath fleet was gone. 200,000 ships, erased as if they never existed. The surface of Akari's Prime burned. The once mighty war machine of Zerath was no more. And then, humanity kept moving. They didn't conquer. They didn't occupy. They simply moved forward. Because the Zerath were never the target. They were just in the way. The message was clear. No one could stop them. The rest of the galaxy watched in horror. This wasn't war. It wasn't conquest. It was something else. A force beyond reason. A power no one could stand against. Humanity had sent a message. Not through diplomacy. Not through words. But through absolute destruction. And that message was clear. Do not interfere. The universe begins to divide. Two choices remain. Now, there are only two sides left. The ones who would stand with humanity, and the ones who would stay far away. The Galactic Council held emergency meetings. Some demanded all-out war. Others said it was suicide. And a few had begun to realize something horrifying. What if humanity wasn't the true enemy? What if they were the only things standing in the way of something worse? Because there was one question still unanswered. If the human fleet wasn't here to conquer the galaxy, then where were they going? And what was waiting for them? The Great Standoff. The galaxy prepares for war. The galaxy's last stand. A fleet unlike any before. The destruction of Ikari's Prime changed everything. For centuries, the Zayrath had been one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. Their fleets had crushed civilizations. Their warriors had enslaved entire species. And in 5 minutes, humanity had erased them. This was no longer about pride. This was about survival. If humanity was truly unstoppable, then the galaxy had one choice left. They had to stand together, or be wiped out. The emergency call, every fleet rallies. The Galactic Council called upon every empire. The Veiled Dominion, known for their unmatched starship production. The Zanari's sovereignty, the greatest tacticians in the known universe. The Tval Collective, a race of cybernetic warriors who had never known fear. Hundreds of fleets moved into formation. Thousands of warships gathered at the border of known space. It was the largest military force ever assembled. More than 2 million ships, a force that could erase entire planets. And yet, every commander knew the truth. They weren't sure if it would be enough. The final barrier, the line in the stars. The Council called this position the last wall, a final defensive stand. Humanity's fleet was approaching, and when they arrived, there would be no negotiations, no compromises. The galaxy had chosen its path, and now the only thing left was war. The first contact, humanity finally speaks. Then, something unexpected happened. A single human ship detached from a fleet. It crossed the vast space between the two forces alone. Every fleet commander held their breath. Was this a trick? A final warning? Then a signal came through. For the first time since the march began, humanity spoke. A single voice projected to every ship. A voice cold and precise. A voice that sent shivers through the commanders listening. Do not interfere. We do not come for you. Stand down or be erased. No threats. No rage. Just a statement of fact. And for a moment, the galaxy hesitated, because they had already seen what happened when humanity erased someone. The Council's fear. What if they weren't the target? The Council was divided. Some demanded an immediate attack. Others asked a question that no one wanted to answer. If we are not their enemy, then who is? Humanity was heading beyond known space, toward a region no empire controlled. A region that had been abandoned for thousands of years. A region filled with ruins. Ruins of civilizations that had vanished overnight. Something was there, and the humans were going straight for it. The final decision, attack or stand down. The Galactic Council had one last meeting. The greatest military minds in the universe debated their next move. One final vote was cast. Would they attack humanity, knowing they would likely lose? Or would they step aside and watch what happened next? The vote was held in silence, and when the results came in, it was almost unanimous. The fleet would not fire. For the first time in history, the galaxy would not choose war. Instead, they would watch, because humanity was heading into the unknown. And if they truly were fighting something worse, then the galaxy had only one hope left, that humanity would win. The war that hadn't begun. Yet, the great fleets stood silent. The galaxy held its breath, and humanity's armada vanished into the void, into the dead zone, into the forgotten systems, where something was waiting, something that had been watching, something that had been sleeping. And now, it was awake. The real target, the true enemy revealed. Into the dark, humanity vanishes beyond known space. The galactic fleet watched in silence. They had gathered millions of warships. The greatest empires had set aside old rivalries, all for one reason, to stop humanity. And yet, when a moment came, they did nothing. They stood by and let the human fleet pass. Because deep down, they knew the truth. Humanity wasn't their enemy. Something else was. And whatever it was, it lay beyond the void. The Forbidden Sector, a place no one returned from. The humans were heading into a place of nightmares. A sector of space that had been dead for eons. No empire controlled it. No fleets patrolled it. Because anyone who entered never came back. For centuries, scholars had studied the ruins left behind. The planets stripped of life. The systems that had no records of war, yet stood empty. Whatever had once lived there was gone. And no one knew why. Or worse, what had erased them? The signal, a warning across the stars. As humanity entered the Forbidden Sector, something changed. Across the galaxy, thousands of sensors triggered at once. An ancient distress beacon, long buried, activated. It sent a single transmission, a signal older than any known civilization. A message that had not been heard in over 1,000,000 years. We are awake. The Harbingers, a nightmare returns. The galactic empires had forgotten their history, forgotten the First War. But humanity hadn't. They had spent centuries preparing, because they knew what was buried in the void. They had seen the signs, the missing systems, the evidence of worlds wiped clean in an instant. They had studied the warnings left behind by civilizations that no longer existed, and they had discovered the enemy's name, the Harbingers, a force not of conquest, not of war, but of absolute extinction. They did not enslave. They did not conquer. They erased. The galaxy watches, frozen in fear. The Galactic Council received the transmission, the signal that humanity had entered Harbinger space. And then, for the first time in recorded history, a live feed came through, broadcasted from the front lines of a war that had not yet begun. And what they saw shook them to their core, because floating in the dark, waiting for them, was a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Vessels the size of moons, cities of living metal, pulsing with unnatural energy, ships that did not reflect light, but absorbed it. The Harbingers had awoken, and humanity? They did not turn back. They charged forward. The first strike, the war begins. The Harbingers moved first. A wave of dark energy erupted from their ships. It did not fire like a normal weapon. It did not explode. It simply unmade everything it touched. The first wave of human warships disappeared instantly. Gone. Not destroyed. Not wreckage. Erased from existence. And still, humanity did not stop. They adapted. They learned. And for the first time in history, the Harbingers faced something they had never encountered before. An enemy that could fight back. The galaxy holds its breath. The final battle begins. For eons, the Harbingers had been unstoppable. Every civilization they faced vanished. But now, for the first time, their prey had come looking for them. And they had come with fire. The greatest fleet ever assembled plunged into the dark. Human warships broke formation, attacking in perfect synchronization. Link-born pilots moved as one, their reflexes enhanced beyond organic limits. Artificial intelligences analyzed enemy movements in real time. Weapons never before seen in galactic history were unleashed. And the Harbingers? They faltered. Not much, not for long, but they faltered. And that was all humanity needed, because they had not come to lose. They had come to win. The final transmission, a message to the stars. As the first Harbinger world burned, a final transmission was sent. Not from a galactic council, not from an empire begging for help, but from humanity itself. It echoed across every known communication network. A message to every species, to every government, to every ruler. A message that no one would ever forget. You feared us. You tried to stop us. You thought we were the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. You were wrong. Now, you will see what we were made to fight. Pray that we win, because if we fail, then nothing will survive. And then, the signal cut out. Humanity was gone, lost in the war that had just begun. And for the first time in history, the galaxy prayed for their survival. Because if they lost, there would be nothing left. The war begins, a battle beyond comprehension. The battle that would decide everything. The galaxy held its breath. Humanity had vanished into the void, into the heart of the unknown, into the war that had ended civilizations before history was even written. And the first transmissions? They were horrifying, because the enemy humanity faced was beyond comprehension. This was not war. This was annihilation. The Harbingers strike, a war unlike any other. The Harbingers did not fight like any known species. They did not deploy fleets in formation. They did not use weapons that could be dodged. They fought like a force of nature. Reality itself twisted where they passed. Ships disappeared before they could fire. Weapons malfunctioned before they could launch. Entire battle cruisers were reduced to dust in seconds. This was not just technology. It was something else, something ancient, something unstoppable, or so they thought, because humanity had come prepared. The human counterattack, fighting the impossible. The first wave of human warships were lost, but humanity did not retreat. They adapted. The Link-born pilots fought faster than organic minds could react. Artificial intelligences rewrote battle strategies in milliseconds. Ships moved in ways that should have been impossible. And for the first time in recorded history, the Harbingers faced resistance. They had never lost before, never faced an enemy that could push back. And now, for the first time, they hesitated. And that hesitation cost them the turning point, humanity's secret weapon. The Harbingers had expected easy victory. They had expected humanity to break like all others before them. But what they didn't know was that humanity had spent centuries preparing for this moment. They had developed weapons unlike any seen in the galaxy. Technology born from desperation. Strategies built from thousands of wars. And then they unleashed it. The singularity cannons. Weapons designed not to destroy, but to consume, to break the very fabric of space. And when the first shot fired, a Harbinger ship ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not wreckage, gone. And for the first time in their existence, the Harbingers knew fear. The first victory, a new war begins. Humanity had won a single battle, but the war was just beginning. The Harbingers were not just one fleet. They were endless. For every ship destroyed, 10 more emerged. For every victory won, a new horror was revealed. The fight was not over in days or weeks. It would last for years. And in the end, only one side would remain. Either humanity, or nothing at all. The galaxy watches and makes a choice. The Galactic Council had feared humanity. They had believed them to be the greatest threat. Now they saw the truth. Humanity had never been the destroyers of the galaxy. They were its last defenders. And, for the first time, the galaxy made a choice. They would not stay silent. They would not just watch. They would fight. Because if humanity fell, then all would fall. The largest alliance in history. The greatest fleets ever assembled moved toward the war. Old enemies set aside their grudges. The Zanari, the Veiled Dominion, the Tval Collective. They all sent everything they had. Because the war was no longer just humanity's fight. It was the battle for existence itself. And in the darkness of the void, where the Harbingers ruled, the greatest war in galactic history had just begun. The final message, a promise to the stars. As humanity's war fleets fought in the void, a new transmission was sent to every species, every government, every ruler. A simple statement, a warning, a promise. We will not fall. We will not kneel. We will not be erased. Stand with us or stay out of our way. But know this, humanity fights for all. And the galaxy? For the first time in history, they fought together. The sacrifice, the cost of victory. The war that had no mercy. There was no end to the Harbingers. Every time a fleet was destroyed, another appeared. They did not retreat. They did not bargain. They did not fear. They were a force of annihilation, unbound by logic or weakness. And now, the war had entered its deadliest phase. Humanity had not come expecting survival. They had come to win, no matter the cost. But the cost? It was greater than anyone had imagined. The fall of the outer fleet. The battlefields stretched across entire systems. Some planets became wastelands of ruined ships and dead civilizations. Others were consumed in a single strike, erased from existence. And the first human fleet? It was dying. The Link-born warriors fought without pause. The artificial intelligence cores directed battles at impossible speeds. But it wasn't enough. For every Harbinger ship destroyed, a dozen more emerged from the abyss. And so, humanity adapted again. The ultimate tactic, the last stand protocol. Humanity knew they could not fight forever. Their ships, their soldiers, their weapons, they were running out. So they made a decision. They would turn themselves into the weapon. Last stand protocol was activated. A command that meant only one thing. If a human warship was critically damaged, it would not retreat. It would not shut down. It would detonate, taking as many Harbingers with it as possible. And suddenly, the Harbingers were not just facing an enemy. They were facing suicidal retribution, the self-sacrifice of the dreadnoughts. The first ship to ignite itself was the HFY Vanguard, a warship 3 kilometers long. Heavily damaged, it could not escape. Instead, the crew sent a single message. Tell Earth we held the line. And then, it went supernova. A wave of energy ripped through the Harbinger fleet. Dozens of their ships were consumed in an instant. One battlecruiser against an armada. And humanity had drawn blood. The tactic spreads. The war becomes a slaughter. One by one, human warships chose sacrifice. Their destruction became their weapon. Harbinger fleets tore into them, expecting surrender. Instead, they were dragged into oblivion. A single battle? It became 1,000 simultaneous suicide strikes. And suddenly, the Harbingers were losing. For the first time in their ancient existence, they were outmatched. Not in firepower, not in numbers, but in pure, relentless fury. The cost? A fleet reduced to ash. The battles raged for weeks, and humanity paid the price. Their warships fell one by one. Entire fleets turned to debris. The greatest pilots, commanders, warriors gone. Even the Link-born, who had once been unstoppable, began to die. Not because they were weak, not because they were outmatched, but because humanity had committed everything. And now, there's almost nothing left. The Allies arrive, hope in the darkness. Just as the war reached its breaking point, the galaxy made its choice. The Zanari's sovereignty, once neutral, arrived with their own war fleet. The Veiled Dominion, once enemies of humanity, brought their battleships. Even the Tval Collective, once cold and emotionless, stood with Earth, because they had seen what humanity had done, and they understood. This was not humanity's fight alone. This was the war to decide the future of the universe. And so, the final battle began, not just for humanity, but for existence itself. The final push, victory at a cost. The combined forces of the galaxy stood beside humanity. The Harbingers had never faced this before. A war not between prey and predator, but between equals, between those who refused to be erased. For the first time in history, the galaxy fought as one. And the Harbingers? They were pushed back, but a price. 700,000 human warships had entered the void. Now, less than 10,000 remained. Humanity had paid the ultimate price, and yet they had won. For the first time in countless millennia, the Harbingers were gone. The aftermath, a galaxy forever changed. The galaxy stared at what remained. Wreckage floated in the void. Once proud fleets reduced to ashes. But the Harbingers? They were gone. Not destroyed, not erased, but defeated. And that was enough, because now the galaxy knew the truth. The Harbingers were not gods, not unstoppable. And if they ever returned, humanity would be waiting. The final message, a new beginning. From the last surviving warships, a final transmission was sent. Not of war, not of conquest, but of truth. We lost more than you will ever know. But we did not fall. The void came for us, and we pushed it back. If the Harbingers return, so will we. The war was over. But the future? The future had just begun. Because now, the galaxy was no longer divided. And at the center of it all, humanity. The message to the stars, a warning and a promise. The war was over, but the echo remained. The Harbingers were gone. The greatest war in history had ended. But the scars? They would last forever. 700,000 human warships had entered the void, fleets so vast they could blot out stars. And now, barely 10,000 remained. Yet, despite the losses, they had won. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The survivors return, a fleet of legends. The human war fleet, once unstoppable, now returned as shadows of its former power. Once mountains of steel, bristling with weapons, now burned, broken, and battle-worn. Every ship that remained was a legend, because they had gone where no fleet had ever gone before, and survived. When the surviving warships entered known space again, the galaxy watched in silence. No one spoke. No one dare hail them, because what words could be spoken? Humanity had fought a war for the universe, and in the process, they had become something more. The final transmission, a message to the galaxy. And then, at last, humanity spoke. Across every known channel, a transmission broadcast to every empire, every world, every ruler, every civilization. A message that would never be forgotten. A voice, calm and firm, rang out across the stars. You thought we were the threat. You feared us. You believed that when we returned, it would be to conquer, to burn, to destroy. You were wrong. We did not come for war. We came because something far worse was waiting in the dark. And now, you know the truth. We pay the price. 700,000 of our warships entered the void. Fewer than 10,000 returned. We did not fight for territory. We did not fight for power. We fought so that you would have a future. And now, the choice is yours. Will you stand with us? The harbingers are gone for now, but they're not dead. They're not erased. They were merely pushed back. And when they return, when the darkness rises again, who will be ready? Who will fight? Humanity will. We are not conquerors. We are not saviors. We are warriors. We stand between the void and existence. And if the harbingers rise again, we will stop them, again and again, for as long as we draw breath. And you must decide if you will stand with us or wait for death. Because make no mistake, if they return and we fail, there will be nothing left. A galaxy forever changed. The transmission ended, and for the first time in history, the galaxy was united. Not in fear, not in war, but in understanding, because they had seen the abyss, and they had seen who had faced it, not the great empires, not the ancient rulers of the stars. Humanity, the species once considered weak, the species once dismissed as reckless, the species that had sent 700,000 warships to fight a war no one else would, and won, the beginning of a new era. After the war, the galaxy changed. New alliances were formed. Old empires set aside their grudges, because now they all had the same enemy. The harbingers were not gone forever. They would return, and when they did, the galaxy would be ready, not as fractured civilizations, not as warring empires, but as one force, because humanity had taught them something greater than war, something stronger than fear, defiance, unity, survival. The final oath, a new future. A new galactic alliance was born, one that would never allow the darkness to rise again. And at the heart of it, humanity, the warriors of the void, the ones who had seen the end and fought back, the ones who had proven the impossible. And so, from this day forward, one truth remained. If the harbingers ever returned, humanity would be waiting. The new age, the legacy of humanity. The war was over, but the story was not. The greatest war in galactic history had ended. The harbingers had been pushed back. Humanity had sacrificed everything, and the galaxy had been forever changed. But this was not the end. This was a beginning, a new era, a new order, one shaped by the species who had saved them all. The United Front, a new galactic alliance. For the first time in history, the galaxy stood together, no longer fractured by old rivalries, no longer divided by petty wars. The harbingers had shown them the truth, that alone they were doomed, that only by standing together could they survive. And so, the Unified Galactic Coalition was born, an alliance of hundreds of species, all pledging to never let the void consume them again. And at its head, not the oldest empire, not the strongest fleet, but the ones who had proven themselves in fire. Humanity, the rise of Earth, from forgotten to unchallenged. Earth had once been a minor world, a species ignored, dismissed. Now, they were the most respected force in the universe. Not because they had conquered, not because they had demanded power, but because they had earned it. Because when the time came, when the galaxy faced true extinction, it was humanity who stood against the dark. It was humanity who had bled for others. And now, every empire knew the truth. If humanity called for war, the galaxy would follow. The rebuilding, a galaxy rising from ashes. The war had left scars. Entire civilizations were gone. Planets reduced to lifeless rock. But the survivors did not mourn forever. They rebuilt, not as separate factions, but as one people. Technology was shared freely. Warships redesigned to fight together. Defenses prepared for the next war. Because the Harbingers would return one day. And this time, the galaxy would be ready. The oath, a promise to the future. The leaders of the coalition gathered on Earth. A moment that would be remembered for eternity. They signed the Galactic Unity Accord. A single vow, written in every language. We stand together. We will not kneel. We will not be erased. And if the void returns, we will face it side by side. It was more than an agreement, more than a treaty. It was a declaration that no matter what came next, humanity and its allies would never break. The final warning, the void still watches. But deep in the black, beyond the reach of any empire, the void still stirred. The Harbingers had been defeated, but they were not destroyed. They had faced resistance for the first time, and they had learned. Now they would adapt, and one day they would return. But when they did, they would not find a fractured, fearful galaxy. They would not find an easy conquest. They would find humanity, stronger, united, waiting. The future, the war that would one day come. As humanity's fleet expanded, as the coalition grew stronger, one truth remained. This was not the end of the war. This was only the first battle. The Harbingers were out there, and the next time they came, it would not be a fight for survival. It would be a reckoning, a war to end them once and for all. And when that day came, the galaxy would not cower. They would stand, because now they had hope, and that hope had a name, humanity. The final words, a legacy forged in war. The last transmission of the war was sent from Earth's new high command. A simple message, a warning, a promise, to the galaxy, to the Harbingers, to anyone who dared to threaten existence again. We are humanity. We do not kneel. We do not surrender. We do not forget. And if you return, we will be waiting. The end, or the beginning. This was not just a war story. This was the start of a legend. Because now, the galaxy had changed forever. And the war that would decide the fate of everything, it was still coming.